just, and therefore have the ability to lead the congregational prayers and have the ability to testify in a court of law, in an Islamic court of law, he would need to satisfy this condition of never ever committing a sin, or at least in public, because we can't really tell what they do in their private time. But generally speaking, a person who never commits a sin, that is a pious person at the very lowest, most basic level. Is that difficult? It is. It's difficult not to commit sins, isn't it? But it's a process that you can train yourself to reach. It may not happen overnight, which it can, but if it's not within our ability, then we could train ourselves to reach that level. One tradition states, fool yourself into worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know how sometimes when you want to train your child to start praying, you bribe him, you entice him, you give him a little incentive here and there, you give him a candy, you give him some money, you promise him to take him out to the football game or whatever. You fool him into becoming a more religious person. You train him. You could do the same thing to yourself. You could train yourself to be a more religious person. If it's difficult to get up and pray, the nightly prayers, the recommended Salatul Layl, if that's difficult, well, you could always fool yourself, get up in the middle of the night and pray while you're lying down. Scholars say that is actually okay. You don't have to be standing up. You don't have to be facing the Qibla. You could just pray while lying down. If you can't be bothered to get up and perform the wudu, you don't have to do that. Just do it with tayammum. Just, swipe your hand on the wall next to you or whatever, and that's considered as your wudu, and then just, as you're lying down, perform the prayers. Your eyes could be shut while you do it. That's okay. And then after a while, maybe, give it a little notch up, and maybe, this time you could sit back and offer your prayers. It's okay. Scholars say it's fine. So it's possible. It's not impossible. What's the next level of piety? The next level up is for someone to avoid areas of perplexity, areas of doubt, areas of confusion. You're not so sure if this is halal or haram. Avoid it, just to be on the safe side. And it makes a lot of sense. If you had 10 cups, each filled with a liquid, and you knew for a fact that 9 of them contain nothing but pure H2O, while the 10th one contains a poisonous, lethal liquid that could kill you, the only logical thing you could do is to avoid all 10, right? Because the consequences of getting this wrong is detrimental, to say the least. It could kill you. So when it comes to acts of sin, if we're not sure, if we don't know, a friend of mine just a couple of days ago asked me a question. He said, Seyed, I've been offered a business proposal. I have a block of land which is in a prime location in the island of Mauritius, which is an Islamic country considered to be a resort kind of island, very beautiful. He said, I've got this prime block of land and I have 4 scenarios. The first is that I could just sell it to the Shangri-La group. They've actually approached me with an offer, which is very lucrative. The second scenario is for me to develop the block of land into a hotel and then sell it to the Shangri-La group. The third scenario is to develop the land, build a hotel, and then give it to another organization, rent it out basically. Rent it. So I'm not sharing the profits or the losses. They just give me a specific amount of money on a monthly basis. So I'm not dealing in the day-to-day business of the hotel, which has to include, for me to get those extra stars, I have to have a bar, I have to have a club, I have to do, everything there, the whole 9 yards. It all has to be included in the hotel. And the fourth and final scenario is to build the hotel, develop it in full, start the business, and then give it to another company that would manage it on my behalf. So I'd be sharing the losses and the profits. So he asked me as to what extent he could go. Could he do any of these things? And I told him that as far as I know, the first scenario is okay. All you're doing is selling a block of land to someone else. The second, I'm a bit doubtful. So what I did was I consulted one of the marajah and I asked them, And the Marja said that it seems okay for him to develop the hotel and then sell it off to someone else. But the third is a bit of it's a bit hard really, because you're developing the hotel and you're receiving profits, and the money that you're receiving, the revenue that's coming in, it's actually coming mostly from the sale of alcoholic beverages. In fact, they say that in hotels, more than 50%, most of the profit is made out of the sale of alcohol and not the rental of those hotel rooms. And so it's a bit, to be on the safe side, stay away from the third scenario and forget about the fourth. So I told him that. He got back to me and said, Seyed, you know what? I'm not going to fool myself. I know what goes on in hotels. I know that I'm going to be facilitating the consumption of intoxicating beverages. I know that I'm going to be facilitating acts of sin very clearly. It's not like, building an apartment tower and then selling it or renting it out where I don't know what really goes on in those apartments. It's not like that. I'm facilitating acts of sin. And so, even though the second scenario seems okay, I'm going to avoid that. So that's the second stage of piety. The third stage of piety is to avoid anything that is discouraged. The acts that we refer to, the religion of Islam refers to as makruhat. Stay away from it. Is it because it's haram? No, it's not haram. It's okay. But it's not something that you would categorize as befitting a faithful man or woman, a follower of the Holy Prophet of Islam, the most pure creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Funny thing is, sort of in the beginning of the holy month of Ramadan this year, I was at a gathering and I was giving a speech and I talked about, I don't know whether the conversation drifted towards the discussion of whether or not it's permissible to have tattoos. And I said to them, you know what, even though some maraja, including Ayatollah Sistani, says that it's halal, it's just not something that you would find Al-Abbas, the brother of Imam al-Hussein, ever burning a tattoo on his arm, even one that says, oh brother, oh Hussein, or what have you. You would never see any of the companions, the great companions of the Imams doing anything like that, would you? So even though it's halal, it's just not right. After the speech, 3 sisters came up to me and said, Seyed, we didn't know it was halal, thank you, we're going to burn tattoos. And I said, weren't you listening to anything I was saying in there? Things that are halal, by all means. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them. You want to do them, knock yourself out. It's just not befitting to the character of a good, faithful man or woman. That's the third level of piety. The fourth level and the final level of piety is to avoid all the permissible acts of life. Anything including eating, drinking, breathing, sleeping, all those different things. Avoid them completely. Now I know what you're thinking. Who is this extremist loser who's out there teaching us that it's haram or that the highest level of piety is to avoid living in general? Well, allow me to elaborate a little bit. In Dua Kumail, which according to some traditions is a divine revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not just the words of the commander of the faithful. It's a divine revelation. Just like the Quran, it's just not included in that book. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say, وَاجْعَلْ أَعْمَالِي وَأَوْرَادِي كُلَّهَا وِرْدًا وَاحِدًا وَحَالِي فِي خِدْمَتِكَ سَرْمَدًا. Oh Allah, make all my deeds and all my offerings a single deed, and make all of my time in your servitude, in your service. In other words, with a simple shift of your intention, you could subtly turn every mundane daily activity that you engage in into an act of worship, just like the holy month of Ramadan. See, that's one of the greatest lessons that we can take out of this month. The fact that this month includes an abundance of blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which turns our mundane daily activities into acts of worship and glorification, that's something that you can take beyond the holy month. How do you do it? Very simple. It's not even something that you have to do. It's just a simple shifting of your intention. It's just about, taking that satellite dish and positioning it towards the right angle. That's all you got to do. We have a hadith that says, if a man or a woman picks up a glass of water takes it up and starts off by saying,